Tallman with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thanks for joining us this morning for our housing poll. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Assembly Secretary.
Thank you, Haley, and good morning, everyone. I'm sorry you've got me this morning on this gorgeous spring day. Stephanie and Anna are both up in Washington, D.C. For the National Community Reinvestment Coalition Conference, as well as the National Low-Income Housing Coalition Conference, and a number of other advocacy events. So over the next week, our team's going to be in DC meeting with our delegation several times, talking about housing things as we continue to advocate for continued funding for these critical resources that impact our communities. So you'll hear a little bit more later in the week. You'll be seeing them on social media a little bit, talking about their experiences. And when we are on this call next week, we'll do a little bit of a debrief on what those meetings were like, what we're hearing from our delegation, how they're talking and thinking about the state of affordable housing and community development in the current Congress and administration, and what the next couple of months will look like, especially now that a continuing resolution has passed and funded the government through September. So be on the lookout for things from our team in Washington, D.C. this week. And we're looking forward to going over all of that with you when they're back. A couple of things to pull out. So this is going to be a very truncated call this morning. And I want to again highlight and thank the more than 529 of you who signed on to the congressional letter to support affordable housing and community development programs. That letter is going to again be presented in the congressional visits as our folks are doing those visits in Washington. As a reminder, that's 196 organizations serving all 100 counties in North Carolina, as well as numerous individuals. Thank you all for putting your name behind that effort. Couple of things that I want to highlight before I pull out two items. One is we have our first NC Lobbying Day coming up on April 9th. Registration is now closed for that event. But we are very excited that 137 people right now are signed up to come to the General Assembly on April 9th to talk to our North Carolina state legislators about the critical need for housing investments, especially with uncertainty at the federal level, keeping an eye on the ways in which the state can step up into that gap. If you've heard me talk recently at a workshop or a presentation, you've probably heard me talk a little bit about the origins of the North Carolina Housing Coalition. And if you haven't, I'm going to right now. We came into being in the 1980s, along with a whole host of other state housing coalitions, when the federal administration at the time, the Reagan administration at the time, was backing out of a lot of federal housing investments, and a group of state advocates and practitioners decided to bring their voice together to ask their state to step up into the gap. We were not the only ones that formed at the same time, but that was the whole reason for being of the North Carolina Housing Coalition, was we were potentially losing massive federal investment, and we were asking our state to step up into the gap, which led to the creation of our state's housing trust fund. As we are continuing to advocate in Congress, and with the administration for the continued flow of these critical resources and continued funding of these critical resources, we are also going to be talking with our state about the ways in which they can and should step up into that gap. So again, thank you to the 137 of you who are joining us in Raleigh on April 9th, and we'll look forward to updating you on that as well. One other item from the coalition is registration is now open for bringing it home. So if you serve folks experiencing homelessness in your community, if you are trying to solve and end homelessness in your communities, I would encourage you to join us. This is May 15th and 16th at the McKimmon Center here in Raleigh. This is an excellent opportunity to network with other folks that are passionate about this and are trying to figure out how to use the limited resources that they have at their disposal to meet an incredible need in their communities. Maybe a community that looks like yours, a set of problems that look like yours, and find out about ways to solve them collectively, to learn from one another, to give each other strength and energy as we're all trying to tackle these big problems that sometimes seem like they're unsolvable. They're not, and we can make massive impact if we do it together. So again, I'd encourage you to register for Bringing It Home, May 15th and 16th, and I think this is particularly timely for the conference as there is a lot of movement in the current administration to change the way that that services are provided for folks experiencing homelessness. And there is a big question mark about ongoing resources. And so it's a good time for us to gather and talk collectively about how do we shift? How do we meet this moment? What can we do differently? How can we build better support for the folks that we serve, for our communities? So May 15th and 16th, registration is open for Bringing It Home. The last big item, really the only big item in the news that I want to lift up now, and then I will let you go about your day, is that House Bill 47 has passed and Governor Stein has signed it into law. This is the Disaster Recovery Act of 2025. And part one of it allocates an additional $524 million to Hurricane Helene relief efforts in Western North Carolina. There is quite a bit in here, especially on the agricultural front, but on the housing front, there's $120 million in there that is targeted toward repairing homes. And this is sort of, it's there to get the work started before the federal money is ready to flow. So the idea is with the state money, you can get a program up and running, knowing that you're going to run a compliant program, a federally compliant program. And when the federal money makes its way down here, you can then refund that to the state, essentially. So there is money in there for rebuilding and repairing homes. There is also another $217 million in there to close out home rebuilding operations in Eastern North Carolina from Hurricane Matthew and Florence. That's a critical piece, as you've seen the gap between the money that is available and the amount of folks still left to serve from Hurricane Matthew and Florence. So that money was in this package. A couple of things to note on the also in the package is that there was no new money in here for rental assistance. The bill simply allows households to claim an additional month's worth of rental assistance from the $1 million that was appropriated to DHHS back in October. There was no money for small businesses grants or loans, but the bill does include $55 million for small business infrastructure grants. But those are actually for local governments to repair public infrastructure that inhibits business operations. So the bill specifically states that those grants cannot be used for infrastructure that the small business owns or is responsible for maintaining. I know several of you have asked about that in particular. And the last piece is that in addition to appropriating the $217 million to NCORE, the Office of Recovery and Resiliency that has been handling relief efforts from Hurricane Matthew and Florence, to complete the rebuilding of the homes that are in steps 6 and 7 of the rebuilding process. It also dissolves NCORE effective October 1, 2026, or once they run out of money, whichever occurs first. And so I think the big thing in that those of us are keeping a close eye on is the handoff, right? There's overlap in the work that GROW-NC, the Governor's Recovery Office of Western North Carolina, that was created through executive order on day one of the Stein administration, as well as the Division of Community Resilience at Commerce that was also created through executive order on day one of the Stein administration, both of which are tasked with quarterbacking the ongoing recovery efforts in Western North Carolina. And the expertise and staffing that's been built up at the Office of Recovery and Resiliency that handled Matthew and Florence, and how, as they are staffing up to address the long-term needs in Western North Carolina, what that handoff looks like. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on that and let you know as we know more. That's what I've got for you today. Again, Stephanie Watkins Cruz and Anna Patterson are both up in Washington, D.C. at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition and the National Income Housing Coalition conferences, and visiting our congressional delegation, talking to them about housing. If you want to send them a message, anything that you want passed along to our elected officials, go ahead and reach out to them. And thank you all for joining. We will see you next time.